fascinating is not the right word, obviously. That's too callous considering the gravity of what's going on. But it's endlessly baffling why more people would not get on the right side of history sooner. It feels like just yesterday, Fox News was nothing more than a 5 o'clock. I don't even know if it was at 5 o'clock. It was, and I feel like nobody remembers this, but Fox News back in the, maybe 96, 97, was nothing more than a segment on the Fox network. It was like a 1 hour, 2 hour block, and Bill O'Reilly and maybe what's his name? Sean Hannity were the only two guys. They may have been running holding their own boom mics. I mean, it was such a small production that was sandwiched between like The Simpsons and another show. Of course, the rest is history as far as what it blew up into. But I'll never forget seeing it, and as far as I knew it at that age. As far as being a teenager of a certain age, I had never seen editorialization like that before from a newscaster. Up until that point, all of my exposure to news had led me to believe that at least the news was trying to, at least journalism was trying to pretend like they were interested in truth above everything else. Why do I bring this stuff up? Well, for a couple reasons. One, because again, I am, I'm always trying to keep my, brush up on my humility by keeping things raw and honest with this show. But the second reason is because this may be old news. It happened about a week ago. Say what you will about mainstream media. Say what you will about Piers Morgan as an individual. But you have to see this, because I've never seen this happen in my lifetime. Just watch and then I'll have some.
I have resisted going as far as you have done in your criticism of the Israeli government. I resist no more. I think we've reached common ground about what we view is happening and has been happening through this period of this blockade, which frankly is just starvation of the people there, including so many innocent young women and children. And I think that the incessant bombing and killing, and we don't know how many civilians have been killed, but it is on a daily basis. It looks like hundreds of people every day. If you look at what Smotrich has been saying, he is talking in a genocidal language about kicking all the Palestinians out. So I think you and I have reached a place in the last few weeks where we are in agreement.
Is this long overdue? Yes. Is it too little too late from a guy who ultimately doesn't really matter? Maybe. However, what is undeniable, I think, is how it's a testament to the gravity of the situation. I mean, people are scrambling to get on the right side of history, rightfully so, but any way you slice it, I think this is for a guy like this to be willing to swallow his pride at any point in this, really, frankly, no matter how late it may be, forces me to reflect on where people's heads were at, my own included, long before October 7th. I may go so far back as 2008, when I was, I did an internship for a, as a Nepo baby, admittedly, for what was called an interparliamentary assembly. It's basically like a UN, a more small scale version of the UN for parliaments instead of governments. And it was based in Malta. And it was during that time that I, for the first time, came in contact with a person who, an educated professional who had just come from the UN herself, who will remain nameless, but who was blazingly intelligent and was taking the side of Palestine. I mean, I was only about 25 years old at the time, so I hadn't been alive for that long in the first place. But it was my first real exposure to a cogent, confident argument from an educated person against Israel as a state. She spoke of injustice. She spoke of, she taught me about the settlements and these things that, just for me personally, I was sheltered. We could get into the weeds. I'm not going to get into the weeds right now as far as, how much of my ignorance to these things was a result of having grown up in North America versus how much of it was just my own personal lack of due diligence. But it planted a seed, which got me eventually interested in the BDS movement years later. But the Piers Morgan thing forces me to reflect on this, because it would be fascinating is not the right word, obviously. That's too callous considering the gravity of what's going on. But it's endlessly baffling why more people would not get on the right side of history sooner, when you consider how much of the impetus behind the state of Israel had to do with post-Holocaust sympathy. Again, this might be hindsight, a matter of hindsight being 2020, So I got to keep my humility in check here, but it seems to me it's a little baffling to me why more people would not. It's a little baffling to me why more people would not become pro-Palestinian purely as a reaction to the phenomenon of there being people brave enough, even around 2008, to speak out against the state of Israel in defense of the Palestinian people. In spite of, right? That's especially back in 2008, but right now it takes a lot less bravery than it did back in 2008 to speak out against the state of Israel. And yet people were doing it. And so I think what my point is that I feel like there's a sort of principle here that's being revealed, where that it may be unprecedented as far as how it's something similar to something along the lines of Occam's razor, where the simpler of two possibilities tends to be the right one. Maybe when it is the case that a certain group that has benefited for decades on the sympathy of a tragedy starts getting pushback from a minority of people who have just an inkling of credibility, maybe that is enough to amplify its own credibility. Stick with me here. I feel like I may be onto something here. Some of you may have turned off, tuned out at this point. For those who are still with me, don't go away, because I feel like what I'm trying to say is that I feel like there's a threshold where one can make a conclusion as far back as, the 80s, where you start to, where you can conclude that if an entity like the State of Israel, which is founded whose actions are so are condoned by the world predominantly due to the understandable sympathy and empathy that might come from something like the Holocaust, starts getting criticized by an educated minority, should that not be all the evidence one needs to conclude that that the entity of the state of Israel in that example is committing atrocities? I got to go right now, but I appreciate you for sticking around. If you like what you saw, please subscribe. You don't have to click the little alarm bell. I'm not going to give you guff about that. But you don't know how much I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.